delighted to be with you this morning. As you say, it's a very busy time, but thank you to the European Movement International for organizing this conference on empowering youth with today's focus on schools. We are, the European Commission, currently in a very exciting transition phase, of course, with a new commission starting soon after hearings of the commissioners designate. And once we have the approval by the newly elected European Parliament. So I think it's a great time for all of us to look ahead to the priorities of the European Union in the coming years, especially when it comes to our policies on education and youth. And it's also a time, and you put it right there at the center today and in this conference, about how we can improve our democracies and institutions, and on our side, how we can ensure that everyone has access to quality education. And for the new Commission, it really will be a top priority to give young people a greater voice on policy also. In her political guidelines for the next Commission, President von der Leyen stressed that we must give young people greater freedom, as she put it, greater responsibility. And with that commitment, she also proposed 2 concrete measures: a youth advisory board that she will create with young people from all member states to act as a sort of sounding board for new ideas and initiatives. And of course, still has to be fleshed out how it will be organized. She also asked that all commissioners engage in youth policy dialogues. This will be a chance for young people to engage directly with the politicians in the Commission, with the commissioners themselves. Because we know that giving young people a say on policy is not just a matter of better democracy, it's also a matter of making better policy. Citizenship education is really a key objective of our long-term vision for education, namely the European education area. And programs like Erasmus+, of course, have a strong role to play here, and it now offers opportunities in schools, in universities, and right through adult education. Lifelong learning is really a vision that we are promoting. And 340 million euro, for example, were granted to Erasmus+ cooperation projects working on supporting democratic participation in 2022 alone. And Erasmus+ Jean Monnet actions include funding support for teachers to learn and teach about the objectives and functions of the EU. We're actually celebrating this week the 35 years of those actions. And we support 200,000 teachers in our Europe-wide network of eTwinning. It's an online space for teachers and school staff to collaborate and also learn from teaching practices across the world. And that's important because every classroom is, of course, different, and every teacher has valuable experience to share. The classroom should be a place of resolution. And we offer a wide range of practical tools for topics like fighting disinformation, the use of digital tools and also artificial intelligence, or teaching about sustainability. And teachers can find these resources on the European School Education Platform and on the EU's Learning Corner website. Opportunities is the second keyword of our discussions today. But while quality education is crucial to create opportunities later in life, we saw that, unfortunately, the results of the OECD's PISA 2022 survey highlighted a significant increase in the rate of underachievement in the basic skills of literacy, mathematics, and science. A growing percentage of our 15-year-olds are not able to interpret simple texts or apply simple scientific knowledge. And for digital skills, so crucial these days, despite being an online generation, around 1/3 of 8th graders do not have basic proficiency levels in computer and information literacy. For the next Commission. We will develop an action plan to strengthen basic skills development through all stages of school education. And with STEM education, a STEM education strategic plan, as we call it, we will promote competencies in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's STEM. We'll do this because these competencies are more necessary than ever before as technology continues to evolve at light speed. Of course, also to the third point of this discussion, upholding fundamental rights. The right to quality and inclusive education and training is, as you know, the very first principle of the European Pillar of Social Rights. And the European education area helps turn these principles into practice, including through investment. In particular, Erasmus+, but not only, complements national efforts towards quality and inclusive education, and it boosts intercultural exchanges, cross-border programs, and innovative teaching. But while students have the right to quality education, this is unfortunately hampered by teacher shortages across the European Union. And it's therefore a priority also to address this. And that's why the next Commission will work on an EU teachers agenda to improve working conditions and career prospects for teachers, although it has been mentioned over the course of these 3 days that the primary responsibility for education indeed lies with member states. The European Union, the Commission, has a supporting role, and our education policies in that field have so too. We know that educational outcomes are better when we cooperate across borders. And we know that Europe has a greater, more positive impact when we realize that the issues of democracy, opportunities, and rights transcend borders, languages, and cultures.
How can we support teachers to teach our students those fundamental values that are not just the fiber that brings our society together, but they underpin the European project as well? Unity, solidarity, tolerance, acceptance. Because I think this is where our new Europeans are being born and educated, and we need to instill those values in them.
I think when it comes to building democratic literacy, it starts with education. In particular, of course, citizenship education that I touched upon a little bit. It's really important to bring students, pupils together to discuss such challenges, to bring people together, rather than having this online battlefield that we sometimes see on social media. We have a strong role as the European Union to promote citizenship education through our e-twinning initiative, for example, which is our online community for schools, teachers, and staff to collaborate. And we will also, starting this month, create a new online group providing teachers with resources on the theme of citizenship education. So really creating, building, teaching about how we navigate these complex digital environments are key. We had a study, the International Computer and Information Literacy Study, that revealed that around 1/3 8th graders did not even have the basic proficiency level in computer and information literacy. So when I say it starts with education, I think that this is really crucial because there is indeed a real danger to lose an important group of young people there. And it's precisely part of the reason why an essential part of the reason why we adopted this digital education action plan. Supporting the teaching profession through the digital transition is very much part of it. We have guidelines, and we want to embed this digital literacy in our teaching for young people. The issue is, of course, broader. Let's be clear about that. It's also about regulation of social media platforms. It's about the independence of our media. It's ultimately about the direction in which we want to see our democracies going for the future.
Indeed, it is a multifaceted battle that we have to address, but I think the stakes are really high, and it's important to equip our children at the early age of their lives with the tools necessary to be better citizens and strengthen our society.
And by the way, we also need, and we do that with the ever-increasing percentage of inclusion in our projects, so that we also make sure that those who also socially and in other ways are more vulnerable also have access to our projects. So I think it goes in two ways. It's the inclusivity is a social question, because only then the rights to education can be, and to quality education can be exercised effectively, if you really have the same and equal access to these things. And of course it goes for the regions as well.
Schools at the intersection of democracy, opportunities and rights. And if you could share your view, you're with the left group on this subject.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I think also in this panel, it might be good to say that before I'm a newly elected MEP, but before that, I also worked as the Minister of Education in Finland in the previous government. So I've worked a lot with these issues, and my background before going into politics, the place that I started was student activism. So I really think that we are discussing exactly the right topic at the moment. And I think that's one of the most important topics actually, is that I think sometimes when we talk about education systems, we are very much focused on the curricula. So what are schools supposed to teach students about democracy, how laws are made, about division of powers between different institutions in society and so on. But if we want to foster activity, if we want to foster civic engagement, we also need to have a strategy within schools and within learning institutions for how to enact democracy in the school itself. So that's where I think that the student activism is so important, and schools are very important also because they are fantastic places to experiment with different forms of democracies. And different ways in which you can engage all students in the activities in schools. So, but I think many times teachers do not get the support that they need, maybe not even the materials that they might need for developing school democracy. And I remember a survey that I read some time ago where they had compared different education systems in different countries, where you could see that some countries where students knew very well how the democratic system worked, they were also very uninterested in participating themselves, or didn't really see what their own role was in society. So that's why we need to focus on both, and also on these different types of ways through which we can engage students at their school.
So a network of civil society organizations working at the national level, promoting non-formal education. So with this perspective, I think, and to complement what Lee said, that it is absolutely important that we promote the cooperation between schools and in general formal education institutions and non-formal and informal education settings and environments, in the sense that these are practices, methodologies and approaches that can really promote an experience-based approach that can engage participants as learners and not only as students that are involved in a more passive way very often, but engage them more actively, and therefore really promote democratic participation as a practice in the classroom as well as outside of the classroom, with ways that can then have a long-lasting effect in democratic participation in general, as well as for the combating discriminations, of course.
There is, we can say, the pedagogy is mostly in most of the countries a hierarchical one. So there is a vertical approach rather than an horizontal approach, and the lack of critical thinking is actually what we can say may not help the students to become after we can say proper citizens that have critical thinking, that can also understand where there is misinformation or fake news.
I wanted to say that the problem that we have now, it's not that much being uneducated, but it's being educated and taking knowledge as a given. because schools have this tendency of promoting a certain type of democracy and a certain type of active engagement, which you don't really feel that you can actually be active. And that's why most students, or at least in my perspective, I felt that we mostly felt as robots working in a very certain sphere that actually restricts you and promotes an individualism that doesn't promote empathy and collective spirit that will move to action. Whereas if school starts promoting critical thinking, then you will start, the risk is for the system, because obviously the youth will be very radical and they will want to bring more change.
So there's a lot of discussion on how we can focus more on literacy, and also, which I think is important, like what else society needs to do, because sometimes we have a tendency to only focus on schools and forget all of the other policies and politics of society that also needs to be aligned if we want to increase equity and equality in society.
But we've been hearing more and more through consultations, surveys, activities implemented also thanks to EU-funded projects, workshops, that there is a need indeed to increase this cooperation to achieve the common goals. And it is also based on this work that we will be releasing soon a position paper on how education policies can be more inclusive. So thanks again for bringing up this topic. The main result, I would say, of all this work is that there is a need, we believe, to continue promoting the whole community approach. This is an essential conceptualization and tool that the EU is also promoting, and which improves the inclusion and participation rate in decisions related to schools and the local education community. So also referring to what Lee was saying to some extent, the importance of not limiting our reasoning to the school institutions and building, if you want, also physically, but thinking more largely about that. And this approach indeed has proven to improve the ability of schools to address the diversity of needs that populates them, because diversity needs to be practiced by the active involvement of all stakeholders of the learning community, we believe, as it is only then, when all the different educational levels collaborate, that a sustainable and comprehensive approach to inclusion can be realized. So in order for it to be inclusive, of course, we need it to be a safe learning space in the first place. Otherwise, it's going to be absolutely impossible to claim that everybody is able to participate on an equal level, of course. So these are approaches that allow different needs to emerge more clearly, and for these needs to enter in a dialogue with each other as well, and to find joint challenges and solutions. So that's why we appreciate that the EU is promoting the whole school, or even better, we like to call it whole community approach, and why we also try to promote it as much as possible thanks to the practices of our members that show that this has a concrete impact on the local community.
Yeah, because EU institutions, Elisa, must seem very far away when you're in school, no matter where you are in Europe, even if you're in a school in Belgium.
And the way that it has been done is that it's not a separate subject on its own, but it's something that each teacher in each subject should be able to incorporate in his or her own teaching. So, you know, for example, if you're teaching climate change, which I think is a very good example, you can at the same time also address issues that has to do with where you find information, how you can check if the information that you have found is correct or not. And I think this really goes back to what was said also around critical thinking, that nowadays these are really too much, as I think it's these are like civic skills that everyone needs. So both strong literacy, because that's the base of everything, media literacy, knowledge around, and also tools to address information that you found and how you can check whether it's correct or not. So instead of just teaching students to remember certain dates by heart, I think it's even more important actually that you give them the tools and the skills to connect the dots for themselves, to make analysis, for critical thinking, for asking questions.
Basically, since people start using social media, big platforms, since they are 12 or even less, we need to teach them how to use it and how to somehow like have an idea what can be true, what can be not, how you can check your information, how you can use it, how long should you use it. how that influences your, for example, focus spam, etc., etc.
Are prepared because the dean of the school is actually interested in the topic, but then you will have also students that do not have how to tackle the problem. And the biggest issue that I see in the lack of this subject is that since there is so much information, sometimes most of the students, most of the, we can say, of the youth may be scared because they hear so much that they do not know how to search for it, and they just decide that maybe the best solution is just, I'm not saying not to inform themselves, but not to inform themselves deeply, because they do not know what to trust and how to search for it.
This is a reason maybe to participate in the debate, not necessarily to go and cast your vote. But then I really think it's a matter also of the political parties, the political offer in general, to tell young people they have a reason to believe in them and go and give them their trust, of course. And this is for the political parties. And then there's a matter for institutions, because then there's also a problem, I believe, of trust in institutions in general, in the institutional system. This is intertwined, of course, with how political parties are going to govern them. But there as well, there is a work that needs to be done by the institutions to show what is that they do that makes sense to young people and can give them hope as well for the future. We heard it before. These are the first generations that do not have necessarily better hopes for improving lifestyle.
I'm not saying outside of Italy, but inside. So if you are not just like, if I have to be precise, if you're a resident in one city, and we can see that most, we can say, of Italians to actually, we can say, go to work in another city, or like 2 or 3 hours from their home place, or even, you know, about the difference between and the problems between the north and the south.
I think that we cannot have a future if young people are not engaged also from the formal education system into being active citizens. And I have to be very frank. I give you my experience. I have been dragged into activism in a soft sense, not I mean being a full-time elected person like I am today as an MEP, but just being dragged into being interested in what was the political discussion, the main social issues being at the center of the agenda of our society through school assemblies. So with many students, I can say that today this is not the case anymore. There is a much less opportunity to discuss in assemblies. There are much more limited occasions. There is also the impact of social media that have changed completely the way people get engaged, and we need to be aware of that, and also try to engage directly. I say that as a person coming from a political party. I know that today it's crucial that we adopt more a campaign approach, so that people know that a party and an association, for example, that comes and speaks to students in a school or tries to get acquainted with them as a clear topic they are fighting for, because the overarching political engagement is becoming less frequent. I think we need more structural engagement of young people in terms of how to become European citizens. This should be more part of the curriculum of the school and not something you win with the European project, like it is often today. So I think there is a lot that we can do in terms of a cultural action, an adjustment of how the institutions and the political organizations talk to people through the social media, and the school has a crucial role, both in terms of allowing debate inside the school, possibly with the self-organizing of the students, and at the same time also bringing more empowerment of being an active citizen, learning how you can, for example, run for an election.
And I just wonder, in light of the Draghi report and the Enrico Letta report, whether we should see a little bit less regulation and a little bit more innovation from Europe when it comes to technology, especially, so that young people can, because they have the head start when it comes to technology. They know more about technology. They are digital natives.
Well, I think the regulation that has been done, of course, has been done for good reasons. So I don't think it's good to make that kind of to make them like options to each other, because of course we also need regulations when it comes to these big data giants. We need regulation to secure people's privacy. We need regulation in terms of data and so on. But looking forward, I think especially if Europe wants to be more sovereign in technology, I think that means really changing the approach a lot. Because if we only regulate big data companies, that actually does not make us less dependent on US or Chinese technology or on US or Chinese social media giants. So I think looking forward that Europe should think a lot more about how we can develop, for example, public digital infrastructure. This is something that could be very much used in the educational field. We could have more open online courses free of charge for students all over Europe. We could use a lot of more cooperation to increase student mobility and mobility overall between the European countries. On top of that, I think Europe should be competing by investing in knowledge, so education, also research. I am a little bit afraid of this kind of general deregulation talk that you can hear a lot now in Brussels after the Draghi report.
Yeah.
Because usually that means less environmental regulation or less labor regulation, which would be very bad news for workers or the environment.
We are talking about the importance of voting, but we have seen that in the schools there are so many students that do not have the knowledge on how to vote, where to go, how to inform themselves, from where to take, for instance, we can see the paper with which they can vote. So that is something that also should not be underestimated, because there have been actually projects also financed by the European Union, where students, we can say, would meet teachers that would explain to them how to vote, why it is important to vote, just the basics. And we have seen by the data that if at the beginning no one wanted to vote, because a lot of them were scared because they didn't know how to do that, at the end of the lessons, just by explaining them how to do that and why it is important, where the vote was born from and why, they were actually interested in voting.
Of course, it's a problem in the European institutions, and that's for sure. It's a problem in all the institutions, it's a problem in all high-level jobs, it's a problem in the parliament. That's because we have barrier of access. And that this barrier of access starts from the education, start from the fact that just a certain specific group of people can access specific education. So it depends where you were born, what kind of background you have, what kind of family you have, what kind of opportunities you have, to just shape the whole life in front of you. And this is actually the responsibility of the European Union, is to lower this barrier of access, to lower these differences, geographical, economical, ethnicity, background, and so on and so forth. And now we believe and we want to invest in education, where we want to invest in education and provide everyone the same opportunities to access the education, which means they shouldn't have to care about family members if they have family members to care about, because the state will provide for that in case. That means that they don't have to work. That means they will have scholarship. I mean, it's good that some targets have been maintained. It's good that on the energy side, for example, there's a lot of progress that want to be made. It's good that we're trying to decarbonize our industry. That all of that is amazing. It's just the approach that, in my opinion, is not the right one. So we're having a very emission-oriented approach which means that we're just aiming to lower our emission, and we know lowering our emission is not solving the whole issues, because could improve climate change partially, but that doesn't mean we can actually mitigate and adapt to climate change and to the environmental collapse if we do not look at the thing in a holistic way. So if we do not approach, for example, deforestation, ocean degradation, if we do not approach the biodiversity issue, if we do not try to change the production system, these are all the same elements of climate, socioeconomic, and environmental collapse that we're living, and the fact that we are making them into little, what this commission is doing is making them into little silos that look like they're not interconnected.
It appears after the election in June as if Europe is moving to the right, far more right-wing members of the European Parliament. Is that a bad thing for young people?
I cannot avoid to say this is a problem for young people, but I try also to briefly say why. Because I think that the challenges that new generations are living even more in terms of perspective for their life compared to older generations. I refer to the climate crisis, the global instability in terms of geopolitical order. All these topics are not confrontable, in my opinion, without a strong European Union. I think that, and I will be even clearer. I would be even clearer. I say European Union, but maybe I should say a functioning multilateral world order that is today under extreme attack by right-wing extremists everywhere. But I think also the geopolitical order, avoiding an escalation of war in the world. We have already a lot of wars that should stop, but we could have more. And all of this without a stronger European Union. So the opposite of what the nationalists that are stronger now in the European Union want. And in general, a functioning multilateral order is something that is of the interest of young people for their future. And so having a stronger presence, which is true, it's a fact that we have more right-wing governments, more right-wing parliamentarians in the European Parliament, is something that I don't think will be useful for these issues, to solve them, to tackle them in the interest of the young.
I don't know. Hopefully we haven't
lost. It's a problem for young people that nationalism and what extreme conservatism that is growing is a problem for the younger generation.
So I'm going to go back to Benedetta, please. Benedetta, what steps can the EU do to ensure that schools are more resilient in the face of societal challenges, especially disinformation and radicalization? And we spoke about political polarization as well. So are you happy enough with the progress, for example, with the DSA, with the AI Act?
Like the whole point of regulation of social media is that we need to start from tackle the main problematic issues, that the social media are owned by private companies, and these private companies have too much freedom in deciding their policies. So basically what we're doing, of course, we have the hate speech, we have some regulation, but the point is that if the regulation is then the final word on a lot of political topic is given to a random Elon Musk, because that's the situation at the moment, they can decide who's friends with one day or the other, and just decide who's allowed to be on there, who's not allowed to be on there, who's allowed to say what or not say what. This is happening a lot, and this is and they are really much entitled to change the algorithm. And then we see what happens with TikTok. A lot of the rise of the far right, for example, in Germany, is given to TikTok. because the algorithm is completely engaging young people. So you see one engaging video, and then you are in that bubble, and then you see all the same engaging videos, and then you start to think, of course you're 15, and you probably, you are starting to understand who you are. You are starting to understand who you are, because that's the age, like you're 16, you're 17, and you engage yourself into things. So what we're doing at the moment, we are giving a lot of our democratic scenario and debate to some private companies, Americans and Chinese private companies mostly, and Russian as well, that decide what we see, how we see it, and what we go engage into. And this is extremely problematic on a democratic level. So, for example, at the moment in Italy, there's this very great proposal about sexual affective education. This is political, because if you teach sexual affective education, you teach to people that diversity and being from the LGBT community, being a woman, and gender violence, that is not good. That you can express your feeling, that you are tackling toxic masculinity and patriarchy. And then you're really doing something that could better the relationship to democracy and extremism. Because if someone is telling me that I shouldn't cry, or someone is telling me that a trans person should be beaten because it's just different, that's what the far right is saying, for example, most of the time. And then at school, I learned for years and years that is not true, that we are all diverse, that is good, I can express my emotion.
I totally agree with Benedetta. Thank you so much for including trans voices as well. Basically, we need people to feel safe. Like, we cannot pretend like the world is the same and all of us are the same. No, we have different backgrounds, we have different talents, etc., etc. We come from different countries, and there is no point lying that it is not, that everything's again rainbows and unicorns, and we need to work with this diversity between us, because I believe that's where the potential is. That's where the beauty can start happening.
And if there is an increase of, we can say, a form of prudence, of worry, of not implementing too strongly these rules for various reasons. There is no time now to talk about the various possible reasons, but there is a possibility, whatever are the reasons, that the European Commission will change course and decide to apply very mildly these rules on the social media regulation, on AI regulation. To be very frank, I don't think this is the problem for our competitiveness. This is a stupid thing. And if you read not a few phrases, but the whole of the Draghi report, it's very clear that the point for us is not the fact that we choose to regulate based on our values, but that if we are incomplete, if we are contradictory, if we are not having a strong commitment together, if the European Union is fragmented, also when it implements this legislation, it will not pursue the objectives of fighting against radicalization, disinformation. If instead we do it together in a more coherent way, and we accept that we cannot have common rules and then national implementations. If we accept this, then there will be less contradictions, more clarity, and more effectiveness in acting, in protecting our democracy for the many issues that the new technologies are posing, for protecting our social model, our freedoms model. That, I think, is a bit unique. We need to be aware of that.
And but I also believe that besides the policy level and the regulation, we need to continue acting on the ground. So it was mentioned also in the chat a little bit, the need for digital citizenship education. We discussed media literacy and we discussed citizenship education, but the two can be combined in the sense that if we consider citizenship education to exclude what happens on the digital realm, then we're not being really pragmatic, are we?
How would I dream of participating in all of these things that are happening? So I think the reason why schools are not promoting the inclusivity that we need is because the system itself is not putting the right people at the right place. Not the right people, but diverse people at the place that they should be, because they don't have the resources to get there.